Hello, my name is Kai, and today I'm going to be talking about how I think Liverpool will set up next season. So, I was recently on an episode of the Club Call-In show where I talked about how I think Liverpool would set up next season with the signings of Jérémie Frimpong, Milos Kerkez, and Florian Wirtz. I got a lot of backlash in the comments with people talking about my criticisms towards particularly Ryan Gravenberch's defending, but also a little bit of Alexis McAllister's, as well as my thought process that Florian Wirtz should play on the left. In this video, I'm going to talk about how I really think Liverpool will set up next season and why I think this is the best offensively, but more importantly, defensively. So let's look at how the team set up last season. Last season, we had Andrew Robertson, Virgil van Dijk, Konate, Trent, McAllister, Gravenberch in the pivot, Cody Gakpo on the left, Salah on the right, Diaz at striker, and Dominic Szoboszlai in the 10. I'm very well aware that sometimes Diaz played on the left with the likes of Jota or Nunes at the striker position. Sometimes you would see the likes of Curtis Jones in the 10 or in the 8, and you would see the amazing cameos of Wataru Endo as our defensive midfielder, and maybe even Connor Bradley at right back. For the purposes of this video, I'm just going to talk about this setup as I do think it was our best team. This is effectively how we set up. Now, when looking at this setup, it's a 4-2-3-1. Arne Slot referred to this as a 4-3-3. The reason for that is partially because a lot of Dutch coaches tend to view this central unit as three midfielders. As people who consume a lot of English media, we think of a 4-3-3 as 2 8s with a holding midfielder. Arne doesn't think that way and just thinks of it as any group of three midfielders, right? So he effectively views Dom as a midfielder. I think that's important in understanding why he would play Florian Wirtz as a left winger as opposed to a midfielder like Dom. And we can think about this in terms of the responsibilities. When Mohamed Salah pushed high and wide or high and near the goal, he was allowed to cheat defensively. We didn't expect him to get back into a good defensive position very quickly. In fact, when the ball would come out, we would actually expect Salah to be the focal point of the team. He held up play and shrugged off defenders. Because of that, someone needs to fill this space. Well, you can get someone like Trent who would also push up into midfield or a little bit high to put crosses in. Trent would occupy a higher position. But now you have this gap. In defense, it's very easy to say that Gravenberch would go here or he would go here with Konate coming out wide when we're defending. And this did end up happening a lot. But who would track the wingers inside? If a winger is coming in, someone must follow him. In our team, it was Dom. This occurred so much to a point where I think a lot of Liverpool fans even started lining up the team in a 4-3-3 because of how often you would see Dom in this area, despite the fact that he's supposed to be a 10. This wasn't something that just happened. This was occurring frequently because Dom needed to defend. You may think, oh, Arne said that Dom should be scoring more goals and getting more assists, right? And I do still think that that's true. But with the amount of defensive work Dom was having to do last season, I think the only player who would have been capable of doing this defensive and offensive role together would have been Fede Valverde. I think there's no one else who would have the engine and the skill to do so. And you may think Florian Wirtz is great defensively, but you really don't want Florian Wirtz to effectively be playing as a 8, you know? You could even be saying that Szoboszlai is playing in almost a Vieira role to an extent. So I wouldn't say you would want Florian Wirtz to play in that position. Now, when we think about how we built up last season, what we saw a lot of was narrow fullbacks. This is something that Arne loves to do. Narrow fullbacks, our wingers go pretty high. We see something virtually like this because the point of this is it's very connected, it's very narrow, it allows you to pack the midfield and get the ball to the wingers very easily. It's a very good formation. This isn't really truly what Arne wants to do with his teams. This is sort of like a bastardized interpretation of it. It's actually, in my opinion, a bit more similar to De Zerbi too. What ended up happening a lot last season as well was Robertson being very restricted, Trent having a freer role. Again, not as free maybe as under Klopp, but a freer role. In an actual slot team, one of the fullbacks tends to invert while the other goes high and wide. You would see this dynamic with Kvindilici Hartman and Lashrel Gershraude. Gershraude is effectively a center back who's capable of inverting. Think like Yuri and Timber. So the way that we're going to do this is going to be very similar to what Arne did. In Arne's team, Igor Paixão played the left wing /10 role, and you could have the likes of Yankuba Minteh as the right winger who was stretching the pitch. In this case, Salah is going to take up a high average position. He's effectively going to do the same thing, except without maybe the dynamism of a Yankuba Minteh. The left winger was effectively a 10 overlapped by a fast left back. Now, if you think about how we're going to set up this season, this makes perfect sense. You put Milos Kerkez here, you take Cody out, and you put Florian Wirtz here. Now suddenly you have your left wing /10, the Paixão role, and the Hartman role. It almost seems perfect. But now the problem you have is, wait, this isn't going to be Trent. This is either going to be Connor Bradley, or it's going to be more likely Jérémie Frimpong. Frimpong is not Latrell Grishauda. In fact, he's fundamentally, in my opinion, the opposite player for that role. Latrell Grishauda would go inside, he'd invert, he could even be in a back three. Frimpong is a flyer. What does that mean? Well, in my mind, it means that you have to duplicate the Paixão role. Essentially, Salah's got to be closer, so Frimpong can fly. Now you're starting to get the picture. But wait, I want Salah to be central. I don't want Salah to be here. How do we do this without stepping on anyone's toes? We pull Szoboszlai back a little bit. Now ask yourself this. Would you want this to be Florian Wirtz? No. But then you're like, oh, it'd be fine, because if this was Flo, we could just have him higher up anyway. But then who's your winger going to be? Who's defending? You want this to be your whole rest defense? No, you don't. So this is more likely to happen. And if this is going to happen, why not just move this over a little bit? What does this look like to you? No, hold on. Let's zoom in on this. What does this look like to you? This looks, to me, a lot like the 3-4-3. It looks a lot like Xabi Alonso's formation. You can see why Florian Wirtz should pick us over Bayern now. He wasn't told that he's playing as a 10, but in reality, he's not just playing as a 10. He's playing in the exact same role that he had at Leverkusen. He is going to be allowed to be everywhere in the left-hand side and start in the left half space a lot. That's exactly where you would want Florian Wirtz to be. And that's exactly where he gets to play. It seems almost like the perfect role for him. And in fact, this role is so great that even if we were getting into scenarios where the fullbacks invert, this is still a great role for him. Because now, if Florian Wirtz has the ball, he gets the option of the underlapper, right? So if he's all the way up here, right? He gets the option to play the ball into the underlapper, or just do what we've seen him do in a lot of compilations and a lot of matches. He can just carry the ball across the face and then take a shot. What better a role for Florian Wirtz than that? It's almost the perfect role for him. He would be the most dominant. And he gets to have the likes of Mo Salah to link up with very close. Now, there are, of course, a few problems here with this setup. And we'll look at one other alternative one next that people have been talking about. And then we'll look into some matches and then potentially into some transfer targets to rectify some of these problems. The immediate thing that you're going to think here is, okay, if this is occurring and we're attacking, this is a big gap. I agree. There are two ways to fix this. One, the DM pushes up higher. That's terrifying. This is a terrifying defense. Another option, the false nine drops in and Salah takes up a more central position. This is more likely to happen. Thing is, if this is Isak, that's almost impossible. This is kind of why I do like the idea of having 3 10s in the team. Imagine you get rid of this and you have someone like, I don't know, you could easily do someone like Julian Alvarez. You have something easily like Julian Alvarez here. I mean, we could do something similar to Diaz, but him dropping in. Or you could go full PSG and have like a Morgan Rogers type player here and do these really cool, intricate combinations. And you would still have great runners on the wings and a great goal scorer in Salah who can still kind of run in behind. And that would be a fun idea. But again, I worry about having lack of pace in the last line. In fact, actually, I think the reason that Flo didn't choose Bayern has less to do with, on the club I talked about the idea of everyone being ball to feet, and I think there's a lot of truth in that. Like, imagine a team of Musiala, Wirtz, Elise behind Kane. No one's going to stretch, and Kane's actually particularly slow. Elise is not the type of guy to run in behind. He likes to stay very wide. Musiala is very far behind in his development at this point. It's kind of terrifying that he's not really becoming the player that we thought he would be. In that team, Florian Wirtz could easily be the 10. You could imagine Flo, Musiala, Elise, Kane. And that would be fine. You wouldn't put Flo on the left there and Musiala central. Musiala hasn't really proved that he can really be that central player. If anything, Musiala is still very good as like sort of this box crashing winger, even though he really shouldn't be. He is. He could do that role. I don't think it's about him being a 10. I think that the fit doesn't make any sense for Florian Wirtz. I don't think he would be actually playing like his best football. He wouldn't be allowed to roam the left half space. He would trip over Musiala. He would have to be forced centrally, and that's not where you want Flo. Flo needs to be able to roam from the left. And again, you might be thinking, okay, let's look at this in attack, right? Let's bring Diaz back, because I'm assuming no new signings right now. Let's assume this is happening, right? Oh, you put these guys wide, Ryan, maybe Verge covers this space. We're really aggressive, give Mac the ball. This is a good position for Flo. I don't know like why people think this is so concerning. I think when people think winger, they think he's going to be here the entire game. But when has that ever happened? Maybe with Lucho, but Mane didn't do that for us. Like a lot of wingers don't. He's going to be inside. And also, Flo's really good at running in behind here. He's very smart at getting these kind of like deceptive runs and kind of box crashing in. So this is a really good position for him, and it gives him the option to take the ball and just dribble. If he does find himself out wide and Milos Kerkez is here and he chooses to drive in, you might be like, oh, but what about your so beautiful defending? Well, someone can come out wide. In fact, if you were to switch these two positions, Dom would be great out here. He'd be great out here. Maybe you fix this defensive question by having Ibu as the central player, and you have all of your midfielders packed here, or you get the teams to get drawn to the right and isolate Frimpong without anyone on him. Maybe you solve it that way. But regardless, you wouldn't play Florian Wirtz as the 10. The quote-unquote 10 in our team now of Dom isn't actually going to be allowed to attack all that often. He's effectively just going to be running around and filling space and sometimes stretching in behind. He's not going to be able to do the beautiful passing that we want. He's not going to have freedom. He's restricted by everything else everyone else does. So why would you play him there? I mean, it just doesn't make sense to me. This makes a lot of sense to me. So regardless, you could even switch these two positions and it would make sense, because Dom's going to be playing as I guess you could say a false 10. He's effectively an 8. I wouldn't really use words like that, but maybe. But this is what you would want to do. And you might not be convinced, and that's perfectly fine. But we can look at some of the things that Arne has done. Specifically, let's look at the Brighton game. I know a lot of people have used the Brighton game as an example, and I do get it. But the reason that we want to use the Brighton game as an example is because we saw Ryan sort of in the central role. So here we have our two center backs. Ryan dropped between the defenders. We formed this sort of back three. We have our two fullbacks narrow, which is sort of the underlapping scenario that I was talking about. And if this happens, we're packing the midfield so our wingers are wide. Our wingers being wide, right, in this case, could be Flo and Mo. I like that, actually, Flo and Mo. Flo and Mo, they're going to be allowed to come inside. They basically get full dominance over those two sides of the pitch. The striker is going to be reactive, right? Assuming we don't sign Isak, the striker will be very reactive and kind of fill the space. But here you see what I was talking about. You have your 3 here, you have your 1 player here, your 1 here, right? This is your quote-unquote 10. This is your quote-unquote deep 8 in the pivot. He'll receive the ball, and he has the option to go here. That's one possibility that we could see. Especially because if this is Mac, because we know from Brighton that McAllister is this really good connecting player, right? If you watched him at Brighton, he was able to connect really deep because of what De Zerbi did. De Zerbi created these, what people would call contact points, for McAllister to easily receive the ball and pass it. But that's actually not his best role. His best role was in the World Cup. If you can remember that Argentinian midfield, you had Rodrigo de Paul, Enzo Fernandez, Alexis McAllister. In that team, your grafter is De Paul. De Paul is Messi's bodyguard. He'll die for the team. You have him running around and breaking up play. Enzo is your first receiver. He's the guy you want getting the ball from deep. He's effectively your deep-lying playmaker. He's like the strolling 10, Andrea Pirlo light style of 6. So you have Enzo there. Where does that leave McAllister? He's your final third, like, connecting player. In the World Cup specifically, he actually mirrored Messi, because Messi, if you don't know, likes to, in this stage of his career, really likes to drop deep and help with build-up. You can't just then vacate the space. Because of that, McAllister went into the final third, because he's very good at connecting play, and you even saw him get passes to players like Di Maria. So McAllister is very good, what I'm saying, at being this connector. Dom's decent at it, but if you imagine this is McAllister instead, the build-up starts to become a lot more clear. But, of course, Ryan didn't choose that option. He chose Kostas, which is fine. You have those two narrow fullbacks for a reason. They are also a passing option. Kostas lays the ball off to Cody. If this was Florian Wirtz, I don't think he would have done what Cody did here. What Cody does here is pass the ball back. I think if this is Florian Wirtz, he gets the ball from here and he drives inside. And he exploits this massive space. And then you have your false nine here. I imagine if this is Florian Wirtz, he could go out here and reverse the ball. This is a great position because he reverses the ball, the striker goes out wide, he's free to progress in. This is Elliott, Mo's somewhere up here. Again, these are perfect positions for him. We're creating scenarios where he can use the things that he's actually good at without having to contribute defensively in our third. I think we are going to use Florian Wirtz as part of the press, and he will press a lot. But I don't think we want him to actually track runners and be this defensive specialist type player that Dom is kind of developing into. We're trying to avoid it. We keep going. Cody, of course, back passes it, and then Kostas ends up finding the deep lying 8. You could easily see McAllister being in this position too. Let's look at another scenario. We switch the roles here. This time, Harvey is the player who is in this, what role Ryan would be playing. Ryan is now in the role that you would expect McAllister to be in, and Dom is in the role that you would actually expect him to be in. So you could see this happening too. Once again, we have a narrow fullback, but the difference here is that we still have this winger in Mo Salah, but he's dropped in a little bit, and Connor Bradley is higher up the pitch. You could easily see Jérémie Frimpong in this role. Very easily, actually. Kostas ends up getting the ball, and now we really have the narrow fullbacks. These are your two fullbacks. They fully separate out this midfield. In this case, this is your midfield. This is your false 9 who dropped in. It's Federico Chiesa. Your two wingers are wide. This is very much like a slot team where he has effectively mirrored the Paixão role on both sides. Because Igor Paixão was the left winger /10. He would hold with or he would come centrally. I think we're doing that with both players. And they're both going to have the license to go forward, but you want Mo closer to the last line and Florian just a few steps back because he's more likely to carry inside. Mo's more likely to try to drive right to the net, if you've watched him play. So we get this scenario. Kostas is here. Here you can very easily see the build-up scenario. In this case, of course, Dom is very high. Elliott's closer. But again, you can imagine this being McAllister or Dom actually being here and Elliott being McAllister. It's very easy to visualize that is possible with those three defensive players, the DM and the two center backs, out of frame because of how much further back they are. So in this case, you know, this play didn't end up developing into something. But later on in the same play, Mo gets the ball. Now the dynamic's changing. You can already see that this is Connor Bradley. You could very easily see this as Jérémie Frimpong. Mo's here. Because, again, Mo's given the opportunity to roam inside, right? You could, again, imagine Wirtz being in this position on the left and carrying inside and trying to find a ball. That's not really what Mo does here. What Mo does here is he ends up eventually getting the ball to Dom, right? So in this case, this could be Alexis. And if this was Alexis, it would be incredible because Alexis is very good at connecting play. Mo's coming in here. You can see Cody is very high up now, despite being that wide winger. This is a perfect role for Florian Wirtz. but like I said before, he can deceptively get past his man when crashing into the box. Perfect role for him. You have your false 9 here, who could be a real 9 if you wanted. You could have Isak there. You have Frimpong. In this case, this is Bradley, but this could be Frimpong here. This is perfect for a lot of the players that we have, profile-wise. You would get the best out of virtually everyone. I think the only person who truly hurts from this formation is Dom. Because Dom ideally would just be on the left wing, and he would be allowed to roam that area a little bit deeper and cross into the box. Instead, he's the one who's going to be suffering in order for everyone else, in my opinion, to be in their best role. And he gets the ball back to Elliott, and here I included this panel just so that you can very obviously see now we have this scenario where the fullbacks are wide, the wingers are in, and you have both of your 8s here, and the 3 who are defending are fully off screen. Let's look at some more panels. So we have another great scenario. This is a good panel to include because you easily see the midfield 3. You see Connor Bradley starting his very narrow run. You see Kostas right here still being very narrow. The wingers are high and wide again. You can see how this is a good way to build up from deep because it gives the pivot a lot of options because he could pass into here, could pass here, he could pass here, he could find Mo here, could go to Kostas, and he can go back. It's a very good role, and it's something that we might need to think about in terms of upgrades on Ryan, because as much as I love him, is he really someone who's elite at passing? You might want to think about it. But he gets the ball to Dom, who we know is great at switching the ball, and he finds Mo in space. Now, you might be thinking, why would I include this panel? Well, the reason Mo is in space is because of Estupinian here. He doesn't know who he's supposed to mark, because Connor Bradley earlier was making that darting run. Is he supposed to cover him? He doesn't have a winger really backing him. I think this is Simon Adingra. He's not really covering him. So he doesn't know who to defend, so Dom is very easily able to find Mo. And the thing is, now that he finds him, Mo bounces the ball off and gets it to Connor Bradley, who you could see being Frimpong in space. Now he does go, and now the winger is trying to mark him. But guess what? He's not actually going to get there. And if that's Jérémie Frimpong, he's definitely not getting there. And you also have Harvey here, which could be, again, your 10 in Dominic Szoboszlai, and your false 9 here. And a little bit off screen, still pretty centrally, you have Cody Gakpo, who's also coming inside, and that would be the Wirtz role. See? Cody's right here at the edge of the box, fully operating in this left half space that Wirtz would love. You have your striker, you have your 10, you have your fullback. This, to me, seems like perfect uses of the players that we have. Let's look at another scenario. And of course, that was the goal that we scored, the first goal. So this time we have switched up a little bit. We have the same relative formation. The 2 fullbacks are quote-unquote fullbacks, because I know this is Ryan, are, again, very central, very narrow. I mean, you have your pivot. In this case, it's Dom. And in this case, Bradley is further up the pitch again, which, again, seems like we're preparing for Jérémie to be here, because he will be flying. Dom gets the ball. He gets it to Ryan. Ryan bounces it off to our 10. Again, easily imagine that that's actually Dom. He would be great in this position. And look at your fullback running, and Mo's a little higher. Again, a position you would probably see him naturally take up. In this case, we have another narrow fullback. I'm actually curious to see Milos Kerkez in this role. I do want to see how well he underlaps, because we've seen him do it a lot more at AZ than he did at Bournemouth, but I definitely think he can do the role. I'm actually very curious to watch him play. And here, bang, you're going to find Kostas Tsimikas in space. He's narrow. It's a great, easy way to build up. He gets the ball. This time, Florian Wirtz is here, right? It would be Flo. It's Cody. Mo, Frimpong, striker. This seems like a beautiful team. Again, you can see that our 10 is never really in the position of a 10. This case, our 10's on the right. Our 10's never in the position of a 10. One of these guys is going to drop in a lot. That's how we're planning on it, because one of the fullbacks is overlapping. So in this case, he's underlapping. Bradley's overlapping. Our winger is wide. Mo comes in. You could imagine the reverse too. It's not rocket science. People don't understand how much Arne was inspired by the PSG game. We're going to be very dynamic next season. He gets here. You can imagine this being flow, but again, your false nine, Mo's here. He's got a runner. If it's Frimpong, he's probably already there by now. And again, this is also why I like the idea of maybe a false nine, because I would like the idea of someone like Morgan Rogers there, but that's only in the world we don't get Isak or Alvarez or even Victor Osimhen. And he's in this position. If you imagine this is a false nine, look at all of your options. That's crazy. Everyone is in the box. And again, your 10's here finally, but you can see the 6 players. If you know anything about Julian Nagelsmann's Bayern team, there were times where they would have this sort of a 3-1-6 structure, and we effectively have that right now. Dom is probably somewhere in the center of the field, and those 3 are probably further back. It's very fluid, and it gives you a lot of attacking options and good opportunities for associative play. Like if you remember that one rondo that we did against Man U when we were kind of bullying them in that game against Erik ten Hag, where that almost resulted in a goal. There are a lot of opportunities for that with this front 6. And here's the last panel I'm showing. This one is once again just showing this 3 structure with him dropped in, winger wide, inverted, and then your false 9 somewhere there. It kind of just shows how Arne is trying to play next season, because once we won the league, he actually decided to start changing up the build-up and starting to actually look at how we're going to play next season. I've talked in great detail about how I think we're going to build up next season. What do I think we're going to change? I think signings-wise, this is going to get a little complicated. And I'm going to make another video talking about potential signings. But the one thing that we haven't really, that I've talked about is this player needs to be able to stretch and link up play. He needs to be able to play deep and stretch. Diaz can actually do this, but he's not elite at it. He's just great. You know, he's great. At times amazing, very inconsistent. And I've also alluded that this needs to be a more ball-playing midfielder. This, in my opinion, lends itself to Adam Wharton. When I talk maybe later in the week or next week about potential signings, you're looking at Adam Wharton as a really good option. Now, in terms of striker, I've given a couple of options in this video of Victor Osimhen, Alexander Isak, Julian Alvarez, and Morgan Rogers. Each one solves different parts of the equation. Rogers would enable you to really link up play here and almost be like prime Barca. Alvarez would do the same thing while also stretching, which is why he's in my S tier of players that we could get. I think the tiers probably go these 2 and then these 2. Osimhen's a great target player, and he's very underrated in hold-up. He would be a very good pickup if we can get him. The problem, of course, is wages and potential attitude problems, but I think the attitude problems are pretty overblown considering how racist Napoli was to him. But Isak would be incredible because we know he can drop in, and we know that if we give him the ball with all of these creators, that he's going to score goals. But the reason I am talking about these, even though this is a video that's not really about transfers, is because there's another way we could build up. But this is something that would get the best out of more players, but maybe give us some problems defensively. The alternative way of building up, instead of doing what we've done here, is keeping the pivot connected. If this happens, we effectively get this sort of structure. If anyone's ever watched a Ralph Rangnick team, they'll be very familiar with how this works. The reason you would do this is your fullbacks are now just doing this. Up and down, up and down, up and down. It fits both of them. They're very athletic. And what it also does is it keeps Wirtz central on the left, Dom central on the right, keeps Salah very close to goal, and gives you the opportunity to make this player more of a stretcher without having to have these build-up necessities. This lends itself, in my opinion, a lot more to Hugo Ekitike, because now he's allowed to run the channels and run in behind. And of course, this is a role that Alexander Isak could do very well, and it's a role that Victor Osimhen could do very well. Probably doesn't lend itself as well to Rogers, and probably not as well to Alvarez, but it maybe shows you how we would potentially play with Isak. The problem here, once again, is Gravenberch is still not good enough of a passer to be in this position. But he could, again, be the carrier, but he's going to struggle in this position. He's not the ideal Arne midfielder in general. But he is good. He's still a very great player, and he offers differences, which is why I would still love to keep him in the squad and give him a lot of minutes. And again, in this scenario, if this is the difference in build-up here is in the final stage, you probably get something closer to this. Florian Wirtz is here. Dom gets to play closer into here. Frimpong. It's similar to what we did before, but now you keep the pivot connected. I worry about things like this because there's a chance that there are gaps and the wrong people to fill it. I have concerns because it would need to look like this, and there's of course more defensive worries here because I'm much more comfortable with something like this than here, you know? But at least what this does do is it gives us so much control over the midfield. We have so many boxes. In this early position, like, the ability to just build up across the pitch is insane. The amount of options that you have to just pass between players does make it interesting. But I do think it's more likely that you'll see something similar to how Xabi Alonso played at Leverkusen. Just maybe a bit more attacking, but with also better center backs, because you're replacing Jonathan Tah, who's awful, with Virgil van Dijk. But this is essentially how I think Liverpool will line up with Florian Wirtz, and I do think it's the best use of him. And in a future video, I think I'm going to talk about why we need to sign more players, who we should sign. I want to look into a bunch of different profiles of players, some young players, and maybe talk about some of the links. So talk about like Mark Gahey. But that's it for this video. Hope you guys liked it. You can find me obviously here on YouTube. I sometimes do club call-in shows, and I also have a Twitter account with this exact handle at Arkai123. Peace out.